Okay. Over the last 15 years or so, synthetic biology has produced genetic tools to engineer populations of cells having new biological functions. However, such tools are generally developed to facilitate the engineering of populations in monoculture. And somewhat more recently, the field has demonstrated interest in developing genetic and computational tools to aid in engineering of multicellular and multi-population systems. So here I'm demonstrating how users can specify an arbitrary complex end behavior and easily optimize inputs to achieve that behavior. So I think we all know this now, but cell-cell communication is a hallmark of multicellularity, but it's not limited to multicellular organisms like plants and animals, but has often been noted in single-celled organisms. So here's a biofilm, which differentiates at high cell densities. And another example is fruiting body formations, which form under starvation conditions. So in each of these situations, it's clear that the population performs a specific task more efficiently and more stably than in individual. And if we can harness even a small amount of this power, perhaps we could make even larger strides in our efforts to perform complex engineered tasks within biological systems. So over the past decade, engineered cell-cell communication has produced a lot of interesting work in controlling population level behavior by repurposing elements of natural systems. So for example, quorum sensing has been engineered to produce concentration-dependent patterns, as shown at the top by Basu and Weiss and Liu a few years ago. And then also from Jeff Tabor and Andy Ellington, edge detection circuits have been engineered such that you have cells that are not just photosensitive, but also require inputs from multiple neighbors in order to enact a visible response. More recently, other systems have been added to this list, including phage-based transmission of DNA messages. This system was actually part of my PhD work with Drew Endy. We demonstrated here that messages having different functions and types can be transmitted between populations of cells in well-mixed liquid culture, as well as over soft agar surfaces, all without any human intervention. Finally, conjugation has also been imagined as a way to transmit user-defined DNA sequences again between cellular populations via physical contact. And this group had published recently computational models to demonstrate the potential power of such a tool, but there are and have been in the past also groups that are currently working on this to demonstrate the same concepts but experimentally. So the nice thing is we now have this balanced suite of cell-cell communication mechanisms for sending both chemical and DNA-based messages over a range of length scales, from quorum sensing, which can send chemical messages at somewhat longer range scales, to conjugation, which actually requires physical contact for transmission to occur. So the reality is that current systems are engineered with one or perhaps a couple of inputs and outputs, but we can imagine systems in which the ability to control programming of many inputs and many outputs would be advantageous. So in order to develop the ability to create more complex patterns like the one on the right from the amorphous computing community, or to even imagine how one might produce artificial organs or program other biomaterials, we need a wider array of tools. And so more specifically, we need to get better at the robust programming of and communication between cellular populations. So in essence, how do we move from creating these biologically inspired patterns to being constrained only by our imaginations? So what I'm presenting here is a flexible model of cell-cell communication to aid in the generation of populations having specific diversity. And I'm just clarifying that this is actually very preliminary work. This is work that I've been working on for maybe about a few months now. So stated differently, the problem that we're trying to examine is one in which components are added in different amounts, and these changes can lead through differences in growth rate, message transmission rates, and time to substantial changes in the end result. So we can imagine a system in which you need to detect some environmental pathogen, perform some complex computation or other things, and ideally you'd be able to accomplish this by using a single population, but you found that for some reason this might be unreliable due to load, or it grows too slowly. But you found that you can systematically break up your problem into different modules. So and you're connecting these modules by extracellular connections in the form of cell-cell communication. So, but now you're presented with a new set of challenges. So for example, the growth rates of each cellular population might be slightly different. The messages transmitted between the cells are also different. And so when you look at this system as a whole, you need some assurance that the populations that you would like to assay are actually showing you a result that's valid. So for example, the assayed populations need to actually be present in reasonable quantities when you'd like to assay it, or the message coverage rates might be pretty low, and so you need to ensure that these are going to be able to provide you with sensible results. So with each of these questions, we know the end result, but we need a way to get there. And so what I've done is I've begun by creating a scalable model of M13-based communication that scales to n populations, and using optimization have developed a tool to determine the necessary inputs when you have a desired, some defined end behavior. So to start to explain the system, from an engineering standpoint, we know that all communication systems have 5 common elements: a message source, a transmitter, a channel, a receiver, and a message destination. The transmitter encodes a message into a transmittable form of that message or a signal. The channel is a functional linkage between the transmitter and the receiver. And then the receiver decodes a signal back into a message and passes this to the message destination. So in M13 cell-cell communication, we have 2 major cell types: sender cells in green and then receiver cells in red. So your sender cell contains a user-defined DNA sequence that's been placed onto a phagemid, and it also contains the M13 genome. And so the M13 genome here is present to provide the phage gene products. And a phagemid is simply a plasmid that contains a specific DNA sequence that allows the phage gene products to package the phagemid DNA instead of the M13 genome. Receiver cells are made of populations that can be infected by the specific phage. So in this case, they have the F plasmid. You know what that means. So when a phage particle has been exported from the cell, it can then just infect the receiver cell like a normal M13 particle, except instead of receiving the phage genome, you now have your message. And so just to overlay the communication system, we have sender cells, which serve as the transmitters. We have phage particles that are being diffused through the population, which is the channel, and then the receiver cells are the receivers. So showing the system in action, here I'm encoding a GFP green fluorescent protein message onto a phagemid within the sender cells, and then I mark my receiver cells using a red fluorescent protein. Adding both populations in co-culture to liquid media, you incubate this for approximately 5 hours and then assay the resultant population by FACS. And so what I expected to see was that sender cells would be marked by green fluorescence. Receiver cells that have not received the message would be marked by red fluorescence only, and then receiver cells that have received the message would not only be red but also green. And so this is exactly what we saw. So at the very start of the co-culture on the left, you only see populations that are singly fluorescent, so you have either green or red cells. However, after 5 hours, you see that there's this emergence of this third population that is not only red but also green. And just for some numbers, this represents approximately 90% of the population, so that indicates that our message coverage rate is actually quite high. So we also demonstrated the message transmission can occur with spatially segregated populations. So here is a soft agar plate where we spot sender cells on one side, receiver cells on another, and then they swim towards each other, and then transmission occurs in the center. And then we also demonstrated that we can send very functional messages. Here I'm sending logic gates and other things. So one particularly interesting feature of M13 and of filamentous phages in general, actually, is that the particles elongate depending on the length of DNA they enclose. So if a particle contains only a few hundred base pairs, they'd be much, much shorter than one that's carrying kilobases of DNA. And M13 has been shown to carry tens of kilobases of DNA. So it gives you a sense of the amount of information that can actually be encoded within a single phage particle. If we now look at a more abstracted view of what's going on, we can begin to imagine systems that have many distinct messages transmitted between cells. So for a system of just 2 sender cells, each producing a single message of having a different length, we have 2 primary sender cell populations. And then we also have sender cells are also receiver cells of the other. So we end up also having this 3rd sender cell population resulting from the infection of one sender cell by the other's message. We also have a single primary receiver cell population, and so when this population is infected by one of the 2 messages, it's transformed into populations R1 and R2, so receiver cells having message 1 or receiver cells having message 2. And these can be further infected by the 2nd message to subsequently be transformed into a receiver cell with both messages, here R1, 2. So immediately you can see that even with just 3 initial populations, 2 sender cell populations and 1 receiver cell populations, we end up having 7 cellular populations and then 2 phage populations as well. So the model that I've created is just a simple mass action model. It has been experimentally verified, though not in my system exactly. And for time reasons, I'm not going into any of the equations, but this can be scaled to having 50 sender cell populations, etc. Using now optimization, I've also developed a way to quickly find the best inputs for a specific output. So in the first example, I'm trying to maximize entropy of the receiver cell populations, so R0, R1, 2, and R1, 2. So if we initially seed the population, oh, you cannot really see that. Okay, there are equal-sized bars up there. If we initially seed the population with equal numbers of each starting population, each of the 2 sender cell populations and the single receiver cell population, we see that there's the result is very, very heavily skewed in favor of the receiver cell populations. And this is just because the receiver cell populations grow slightly faster than the sender cells. And further, we see that the R0 state, so these are the receiver cell messages that have not received any message, are really, really overpopulating or winning, if you will, the race at some specified point here. It's just 5 hours. So now if we optimize using just constrained optimization, we see that we can just receive, so the sender cell 1 in this case is very, very low compared to sender cell 2, and both are actually, well, sender cell 2 is slightly higher than the initial input. But so basically, once we optimize for the inputs, we can get even distributions of these receiver cell populations at the end point. But we also might care about message coverage rate. So if we want a double message coverage rate of 50% or more, for example, we can again optimize for this. So in this case, initially, if we have just initial seeding at equal levels, we see very, very few of the population, or few cells of the population that we really care about. However, after optimization, we see this primary population that ends up being the R1, 2. So we've successfully optimized. And these are all values that are experimentally relevant and that are, they're not, you have no, yeah, anyway. So what I've described today is our efforts to do 2 main things. To first create a scalable model of M13 communication to understand the flow of information through these systems. And I've also demonstrated how using simple constrained optimization, we can begin to see how users can determine improved inputs for their specific systems given some defined end goal. So at the start of my talk, I discussed that previous efforts have provided multiple cell-cell communication modalities from which synthetic biologists can now choose, including quorum sensing and conjugation. So immediate next steps are to expand my model to allow for more flexibility in terms of communication channels, and experimentally to combine the different mechanisms into a single system has not actually yet been done. So I'm hoping that this type of work will at least provide people with some sort of simulation so that they can get a sense of how this research might be useful to them. So I'd like to thank my PI, Radhika Nagpal, the SSR lab at Harvard, in which I'm now housed, and thank you all for your attention, and I can take any questions.
Any questions for Martin? Yeah, Austin? The soft paper experiment. So, what did the plate look like after a long time? So you just had red and green.
Yeah.
Can you see the mixing?
You can't.
Macroscopically?
So you can't really. But I had a student that was working with me who basically took away the fluorescence and only had a strip, and so you could, in some cases, actually see slight fluorescence right at the mixing point. But when I assay actually that section, it's roughly 33% of receiver cells that have also gotten the message. So it's about 33% message coverage in agar solutions, which is actually pretty comparable to quorum sensing systems.
It's just because when they're doing, it's just low agar, right? What percentage is it?
0.2.
Yeah, so they're doing chemotaxis, and I think that they run out of what they're tracking.
Right.
That's why they stop.
Mm-hmm.
This is Adler's classic experiments from the 60s. So I was wondering if after a while diffusion would do the job for you.
So the reality is with M13, you actually need them to be somewhat actively growing.
Okay.
And so at this mixing point, they do continue to diffuse for a while. But so I had assayed these regions after 2 days. I think after 2 days. It's been a couple of years now, but I think after about 2 days, and I was seeing. I mean, you definitely see invasion of these cells into both regions, but it's not, it's not towards the edge, towards the other edge or something.
Yeah, because it's diffusion.
Right.
Thanks.
I have a quick question. So, Monica, listen to what you're saying, and also to Victor's talk. It's interesting that maybe synthetic biologists now are having more success by making artificial communities rather than artificial genomes. It actually looks more practical, more quickly to me than some of the rewiring work that we hear about. So, is there any intrinsic limit to how many different senders and receivers you can get within your system, or does it just depend on your ability to analyze the system? At what point does it get so complex you can't engineer it anymore?
That's an interesting question. So with M13, it's a system that I know. This is the reason that we started with the system. And the reality, though, is when you have too many messages, ultimately the result is going to be one of like absorption, right? So in theory, everything should get every message. This doesn't happen for biological reasons, but in theory, this should be the case. So I think if you incorporate spatial segregation or other mechanisms, you could probably get many of these. You could incorporate many sender cells, many distinct receiver cell populations, and get pretty interesting results. But in well-mixed systems, my guess would be maybe 2 or 3. Yeah. Gareth?
One last question.
Yeah, so when you have these phage in the environment, you can't get rid of them. So do you have any ideas of how you can potentially have self-degradations of these so that you're not always propagating or affecting your results later
So there
on?
actually has been some work on making the system such that it can turn on and turn off. Obviously, that does not take care of the phage that are already present in the environment, but it does take care potentially of, you could basically induce phage production and stop phage production. I don't really know actually of any way of getting rid of them other than to stop accepting the phage, which you could also potentially do.
All right, let's thank Monica again.